Have you ever been in that place where you're giving your all, showing up and doing everything you can to make their relationship work, only to feel like she's pulling away? It's frustrating, right? But what if I told you that the solution isn't chasing harder or trying to convince her of your worth? The truth is, the moment you stop wanting her so much, that's when the game changes. In today's video, we're going to dive into why she'll return when you no longer want her, and how this shift in your mindset not only brings her closer, but helps you become the strongest version of yourself. Let's break it down and see why stepping back is actually the key to moving forward. Number 1, the shift she never expected. The shift she never expected. There was a time when she could almost predict your behavior. You'd reach out, you'd check in, you'd try again no matter how things ended last time. That version of you was consistent, perhaps too forgiving, always looking for resolution. But now the rhythm has changed. You no longer react, you no longer rush to reconnect. That silence she once found comforting, knowing you'd always be there, is now unsettling. It makes her question everything. And the most unexpected part, you're not doing it to punish her. You're doing it because you've outgrown the chase. Like a stoic, you've turned inward, not to hide, but to reclaim your peace. That internal shift is more powerful than anything you could have said out loud. She didn't expect this new version of you, the one who doesn't flinch when she pulls away, the one who doesn't show up just because she's suddenly unsure. She remembers the old pattern. You would check in after a few days, maybe ask if she was okay, maybe apologize just to break the silence, even if it wasn't your fault. That comfort gave her a sense of control, but now her expectations are met with nothing but calm stillness. You're not bitter. You're not angry. You're just still, and that to her is far more terrifying than any argument. You're no longer playing the role of the emotional safety net. You've taken back your energy, and that's where your power lies. A Stoic doesn't shout to be heard. He lets his silence reveal the truth. You're no longer investing in confusion. You've stopped negotiating with uncertainty. Instead, you've invested in clarity, your own. And now she's starting to see what she never truly saw before, your worth in absence. She's looking back at the times you stayed, supported, forgave, and offered softness even when you were hurting. But now that those gestures are gone, she understands they weren't guaranteed. They were choices yours. Choices you no longer make, for someone who didn't value them when they were freely given. This is the shift she never prepared for. She thought she had more time, more chances, more of your patience. But a man grounded in self-respect doesn't repeat cycles just because they're familiar. You're no longer that predictable comfort. You're the mystery she can't solve. And when a woman starts to realize she's lost access to the man who once gave her the benefit of the doubt, when she sees he's not waiting anymore, something in her begins to unravel. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage, but in your case, to let go fully, calmly, and without resentment, that is the courage. And that's what sets you apart. You're not chasing closure. You've become it. You're not hoping she comes back. You've already moved forward. And ironically, that's exactly when she turns around. She'll return not to the version of you she knew, but to the man she never expected you'd become, the one who no longer needs her validation, the one who found peace in letting go, the one whose silence doesn't beg but speaks. That shift, it didn't just change her perception of you, it changed everything. Number 2, the weight of your absence. The weight of your absence. When a man who was once so emotionally available becomes still, the silence becomes heavy. At first, she might shrug it off. She tells herself you're just taking a break, that the silence is temporary. But when days turn into weeks and there's still no message from you, something starts to unravel. Your absence, once assumed to be fleeting, begins to feel permanent, and that's when she starts to feel the full weight of it. Not just the silence, but what it symbolizes. You're no longer available. Not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. You see, there was a time when she felt your presence even in your distance. Because deep down, she believed she still had a hold on your heart, that you'd return like you always did. But this time, you didn't. No more checking in. No more subtle signs that you're waiting. The man who once filled the silence with effort, with apologies, with hope, is now filling it with calm, with direction, with dignity. And that shift, it's deafening to her. Like the Stoic Seneca once wrote, sometimes even to live is an act of courage. And in your case, to live without needing her validation, to let go without resentment, to walk away without slamming the door, is the most courageous thing you've done. Not out of bitterness, but out of understanding, because you've learned that peace isn't something someone else can give you. It's something you choose when you finally stop chasing what drains you. Let me ask you, how many times did you break your own heart just to keep her comfortable? How many times did you send that final message, hoping it would fix what she didn't even want to repair? But now, there are no more last messages, no more emotional crumbs. You're not punishing her by being silent. You're protecting yourself. You're no longer participating in a cycle that wore you down. And that choice, your absence wrapped in self-respect, is starting to echo in ways she never anticipated. She'll return when you no longer want her, not because of some game, but because your silence now speaks with the authority of a man who has outgrown what once hurt him. And the weight she feels, that's not just your absence. That's her finally noticing the value of your presence now, that it's no longer hers to claim. If this resonates with you, take a second to support the message. Hit that like button and drop a comment sharing your thoughts, or if you'd rather keep it simple, just type "My peace comes first" below. It's a powerful reminder, not just for you, but for every man who's learning the strength of walking away with calm and clarity. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Now, let's go even deeper. When her control slips. Number 3. When her control slips, there was a time when she could push your buttons and expect a reaction. You were emotionally predictable, quick to comfort, quick to chase, quick to forgive. She knew your patterns, your rhythms, your weakness for her tears or distant moods. And for a while, you may have believed that was love showing up no matter how many times you were dismissed. But not anymore. Now, your emotional energy has become unreadable. You no longer rise to the bait. You no longer rush in to fix what wasn't yours to break. She might send a vague message, drop a subtle hint, or try to provoke a familiar reaction, but you stay grounded. You don't flinch. You don't play into her pattern. And the moment she realizes she no longer has that kind of influence over you, that's when the control begins to slip from her hands. This shift isn't about revenge or manipulation. It's about transformation. A stoic man doesn't let someone else pull the strings on his peace. He doesn't live at the mercy of emotional weather. Instead, like Epictetus taught, he focuses on what he can control, his thoughts, his actions, his energy. So when she comes looking for the version of you who used to bend to her moods and finds only silence, it unsettles her. Let's say you were once the guy who stayed up at night overthinking, a cold reply or a distant tone. But now you see it for what it is, a test of power, not a sign of connection. So you no longer react. You respond with stillness, with calm, with boundaries. And that kind of presence, a presence that doesn't chase, doesn't explain, doesn't panic, that's when she feels the shift, because here's what she never expected, that the man she once controlled with a look or a word would become a man in full control of himself. And when that happens, the power dynamic changes. The more she tries to reach the old version of you, the more she realizes he's not there anymore. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself more. And that's when the story flips. That's when she begins to feel the pull. Because she'll return not to the man who needed her, but to the man who outgrew her. Emotional hold. And by then, your silence will speak louder than any words ever could. You've outgrown the old version of you, number 4. You've outgrown the old version of you. She's thinking about them and you used to be. The one who would have answered her text at midnight, no matter how cold she'd been earlier that day. The one who excused mixed signals because he saw the best in her. The one who hoped love alone could fix what respect never built. That man, the one who tried too hard, who gave too much, who constantly fought for connection, even when it meant losing himself, he's gone now. Not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. That version of you was driven by fear. Fear of losing her, fear of not being enough, fear that walking away meant failure. But growth changed everything. You've been through the fire. You've sat in silence with your own pain. You've questioned your worth and rebuilt your standards from scratch. Now you're not chasing affection that disappears when it's inconvenient. You're not apologizing for expecting clarity. You no longer settle for being almost enough in someone else's story. You want alignment, peace, truth, and you're willing to walk away to protect it. What she doesn't fully realize is that her return won't hit the same anymore. Not because you hate her, but because you no longer need her validation to feel whole. You filled the space she left with purpose, with presence, with the kind of inner strength that doesn't yell to be heard. A stoic man, after all, isn't reactive. He doesn't chase what confuses him. He doesn't cling to what no longer serves his higher self. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." And you have, without performance, without posts, just quiet, consistent growth. And now she senses it. Maybe she hasn't said anything yet, but she feels the shift. She remembers the man who once waited by his phone, but this time, when she looks for him, he's not there. Not emotionally, not mentally, not energetically. And that absence isn't punishment, it's transformation. So if she returns, and she probably will, it won't be to the man she left. It'll be to a man who no longer waits. A man who no longer entertains what once drained him. A man whose silence speaks of self-worth, not pride. She'll return when you no longer want her. And when she does, she'll come face to face with something she never expected. The man she always wanted, but who now wants something far greater than her. Attention. He wants peace, and he's willing to lose anything that threatens it. Before we move on, take a moment to sit with that thought. Think about the man you've become, not the one defined by someone else's approval, but the one shaped by your own discipline, standards, and peace of mind. Ask yourself, how many times have you sacrificed your own well-being just to keep someone in your life? And how different would things be if you had chosen yourself sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Whether it's a sentence, a reflection, or even just a word that sums up your own transformation, share it below. Because this isn't just about her return, it's about the man you've built in her absence. Now let's go deeper. Number 5, she doesn't recognize your energy anymore. When you were emotionally attached, your energy said it all. You were available, present, and always ready to fix things. Even when it wasn't your mess to clean up, you responded quickly. You over-explained. You reassured her even when she was the one pulling away. Back then, your presence was like an open door, constant, predictable, and easy to walk through. She had access to your heart without having to earn it. But now you move differently. You respond slower, not out of pettiness, but out of clarity. You no longer hand out your attention like it's owed. You protect your peace like it's sacred, because now it is. And that shift, it's not something she expected. She doesn't recognize this version of you anymore. The version that no longer bends for validation or rushes to soothe tension just to keep the connection alive. And that unfamiliarity, it draws her in. It's the silence after the storm that unsettles her. It's the emotional detachment you now embody. Not because you're cold, but because you've learned the cost of pouring into someone who only held out a half-full cup. You didn't need to announce your growth. You didn't need to slam the door, leave a bitter message, or try to make her feel what you once felt. Instead, you did the most powerful thing a man can do. You shifted quietly, gradually, completely. From a Stoic perspective, this isn't about becoming unfilling. It's about becoming unshakable. As Marcus Aurelius taught, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And that's exactly what you've done. You stopped trying to manage her moods, and you started mastering your own. Now your presence isn't predictable, it's purposeful. And what's more powerful than a man who no longer seeks closure, approval, or permission? A man who no longer wants her, not from anger, but from understanding. She's not used to this version of you, the version who smiles without needing her response, who lives without needing her presence. And that version, that's the one she'll remember when you're no longer looking back. She'll return when you no longer want her. Not because of games or manipulation, but because your evolved energy is no longer something she can take for granted. You've become the kind of man who walks forward, not to prove a point, but to protect your peace, and she'll feel that shift long after you've stopped reaching out. Number 6, she'll test the waters again. It usually starts small. A story view, a like on a photo from 2 weeks ago, a vague message. This reminded me of you with no context. She's not fully back, not yet. But she's hovering at the edge, watching your energy, sensing the shift, wondering if you'd still open the door like you used to. She's testing not because she's sure she wants back in, but because she wants to know if the option still exists. But here's the thing. You're not that man anymore. The one who jumped at crumbs. The one who read too deeply into half-hearted gestures. The one who filled in the blanks of her uncertainty with hope. Back then, her smallest action could spark your entire day. You were emotionally available, even when she was inconsistent. But now you move differently. Now you've learned that interest without intention is just noise. And you're no longer available for noise. That's what she doesn't expect. That silence, that calm, that lack of urgency in your response, or maybe no response at all, because this version of you has grown past the need for external reassurance. You're not sitting by the phone anymore. You're not overanalyzing what a like means. You're not reaching for meaning in moments that lack substance. You've realized that some people don't reach out because they care. They reach out to confirm that they still can. A Stoic man understands this. He isn't swayed by fleeting gestures. He doesn't confuse activity with effort or curiosity with commitment. He lives by principle, not emotional impulse. As Epictetus taught, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. And so, you don't react. You reflect, you don't chase, you evaluate, you don't respond just because she reached out. You consider whether it aligns with your peace. Let's be real. She might expect you to reply instantly to validate her reappearance, to signal that you're still available, still waiting. But when that message sits unanswered, when her digital breadcrumb doesn't lead to the same reaction it used to, that's when the shift hits her. That's when she realizes the man who once clung to every interaction now protects his energy like it's sacred, because it is. Maybe she's hoping to feel that same control she once had, but now she doesn't recognize this version of you. You're still grounded, selective. You no longer see her as a prize to win back, but as someone who once had access and lost it. And that access, it's no longer guaranteed. So if she tries to test the waters again, let her watch without reacting. Feel without responding, because your peace isn't up for negotiation anymore. You've outgrown the story where you need to prove your worth. And when she realizes she's not testing a man who's waiting, but a man who's moved on, that's when the weight of your silence becomes real. That's when she begins to understand. She'll return, but by then you may no longer want her. Number 7, you no longer need closure. You no longer need closure. She may return hoping to finally talk, to explain, to clean up the loose ends she left behind. But by now, you've already made peace with or without her words. You've realized that closure isn't something another person can give you. It's something you build within. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Peace is internal. You don't need one more apology. You don't need validation. You don't need to rehash the past. You've already turned the page, and here's the moment that catches her off guard. You're no longer interested in reopening the book she closed. Maybe she expected you to still be hurt, to still crave answers, to still hope for some grand confession that would make the pain worth it. But when she shows up and finds a man who's moved on, not out of spite but out of strength, it creates a silence she wasn't prepared for, a silence that reflects her own delay. You see, the man you've become doesn't wait for someone else to give him permission to heal. You chose peace the moment you stopped seeking clarity from someone who brought confusion. You chose stillness over chaos, and like a true Stoic, you didn't demand closure. You created it through acceptance. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." So when she finally reaches out, expecting to resume an emotional conversation that already ended for you long ago, she'll feel something she didn't expect. Irrelevance. Not because you're trying to hurt her, but because you've outgrown the need for her to make sense of your story. And ironically, that's when she begins to question everything, because closure is no longer yours to seek, it's hers to face. Before we move forward, take a moment to really sit with this. Think about how many times in your life you've waited for someone else to give you an ending, when in truth, the ending was already in your hands. That shift from needing their words to relying on your own acceptance is where your power lives. If this resonates with you, let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts or simply type, "I choose my own closure." Because the moment you own that truth, you stop waiting for permission to move on, and you start living on your terms. She starts to romanticize the past. Number 8. She starts to romanticize the past. Time has a subtle way of rewriting history, especially when regret begins to whisper. She starts to remember you differently, not as the man she left wondering, but as the man who always showed up. Suddenly, the little things you did become grand in her memory. The texts you used to send, they weren't just messages. They were proof that someone cared. The way you used to listen, that wasn't ordinary. It was rare. Your presence, once taken for granted, now feels like the kind of comfort she can't find anymore. And in that quiet, she starts to wonder how she ever let it go. But here's what she's not recalling so clearly, the way she pulled back without explanation. How you felt like you were always giving more than you received. The confusion she left you in when she treated your loyalty like an option. She forgets how you waited, hoped, and tried to hold things together while she drifted away. Those memories, they get buried beneath the glow of nostalgia. That's the mind's trick. It edits thestry when the silence gets loud. You, however, see it all now with new eyes. You're not lost in what could have been. You're grounded in what was. You remember both the warmth and the wounds, and you no longer let one override the other. That's the difference. That's the growth. A Stoic man doesn't allow longing to cloud his perception. He holds the past gently but firmly, grateful for the lessons, unshaken by the illusions. Maybe once the thought of her returning would have lit a spark in you. Maybe you would have welcomed her back without hesitation, hoping that this time would be different. But not anymore, because now you've cultivated something she didn't expect. Clarity. You've stopped replaying the fantasy and started living in reality. As Epictetus taught, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And her choices, her silence, her return, that's all beyond you. Now, what's within you is your peace, your power, your refusal to reattach to what once made you question your worth. So when she shows up softly hinting at a reunion, romanticizing a version of the past that's been polished by distance, you'll know the truth. You'll feel the pull, maybe, but you won't be moved because you're not the man who needed her to choose. You've become the man who chooses peace, and once you've tasted that kind of freedom, no amount of memory can lure you back into emotional captivity. Your silence becomes her mirror. Number 9. Your silence becomes her mirror. Sometimes the most powerful feedback you can give is none at all. Your silence becomes a mirror, forcing her to sit with her choices. She starts replaying moments, words she said, things she did, not because you reminded her, but because your absence did. And that's the most stoic act of all, allowing consequences to unfold without interference. You're not punishing her, you're just not rescuing her from reflection. Your silence isn't empty, it's full of the meaning she once ignored, and now she has to face it without you holding the emotional safety net. You see, a man who used to respond instantly, who used to explain, reassure, and try to fix everything, even when he was the one being hurt, has no gone still. Not out of spite, but out of growth. That version of you who needed to be understood no longer leads the way. In his place stands a man who understands himself, and because you no longer chase clarity from her, she's left to search for it in her own mind. That's where the real shift begins. Let's say she once walked away thinking you'd always be there. Maybe she believed your patience had no end. Maybe she thought your heart would always be accessible. But your silence, it shattered that illusion. It told a story louder than words ever could, that you've evolved past the need to explain your worth to someone who overlooked it. And now she's the one sitting in silence, staring at the reflection of a man who no longer revolves around her approval. From a Stoic lens, this is discipline in action. Not reacting out of emotion, not correcting her perception, just letting reality speak for itself. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the best answer to anger is silence. And while she may not be angry, the same rule applies to confusion, regret, and realization. You don't need to confirm what she's starting to feel. You simply need to keep walking your path with clarity, with peace, and with your energy turned inward. She'll return when you no longer want her. And it will be this silence, the one she once saw as cold, that made her finally see herself clearly. Not the version she pretended to be, but the one who lost a man she thought she could keep on standby. That's the power of a mirror she can't look away from. And that mirror is you. Take a second to think about this. How many times in your life have you tried to explain yourself to someone who was never truly listening? How often did that effort only drain you instead of change them? If this part of the message resonates with you, hit the like button so I know you're walking the same path of self-mastery. And in the comments, share your thoughts or simply type, "My silence speaks for me," because sometimes the strongest move a man can make is to let the echo of his stillness do the talking. Now, let's go deeper. Number 10. You've reclaimed your standards. Now your peace is sacred. Your energy isn't given, it's earned. You don't allow access based on history. You require alignment. And that shift, it's what she never expected. Because once upon a time, your standards were flexible. You gave chances based on feelings, not facts. You held on out of memory, not mutuality. You forgave too quickly, accepted too little, and confused patience with permission. But now that era is over. She might try to come back with nostalgia in her tone. She might bring up the good times, remind you of what you shared, try to reopen a door she once slammed shut. But the man she left behind is not the man standing here today. The old you might have welcomed her without hesitation, thinking, love was reason enough. But then you've been through the fire. And fire doesn't just burn, it forges. What you've built now isn't ego, it's clarity. It's structure, it's non-negotiable peace. Stoicism teaches us that self-mastery begins with self-respect. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are and then adorn." yourself accordingly. You know who you are now, and that means you no longer bend your standards to fit someone's return. You measure their presence not by how much you miss them, but by how well they fit your present. Let's say she reaches out. She wants to talk. She wants to catch up. You feel that old flicker, but instead of rushing in, you pause. You don't ask, "Does she still love me?" You ask, "Do I still align with this?" That's the Stoic way. You don't chase temporary emotion. You weigh the long-term cost to your peace, because now you've learned to ask better questions. Is this healthy? Is this consistent? Is this someone who respects what I've built? And if the answer is no, you don't try to fix it. You don't bargain. You walk quietly, confidently, without regret. Because when you've reclaimed your standards, you stop seeing her return as a victory and start seeing it as a test, one you no longer feel the need to pass. She returns, but you've already moved on. Number 11, she returns, but you've already moved on. And when she finally reaches out, when the silence becomes too loud for her to bear, she'll find a man who no longer needs her to return. Not because he stopped caring, but because he started caring for himself more. You've done the work. You sat with the ache, the confusion, the void she left behind. You didn't fill it with distractions. You filled it with purpose. The gym became your temple. Books became your mentors. Peace became your new standard. So now, when her name lights up your screen, it doesn't light up your world, because that world no longer revolves around her. It revolves around your mission, your clarity, your self-respect. You remember how it felt when you waited, when you hoped she'd finally see your worth. But now you see it clearly, without her recognition. That's the shift she never expected. Maybe she comes back with tear-airy eyes, trembling words, and a heart full of "I miss you." Maybe she admits she was wrong, that she didn't know what she had. And once those words would have disarmed you, you would have dropped everything to hold her again. But not this time. Not because you're bitter, but because you're better. A Stoic doesn't build walls out of pain. He builds boundaries out of wisdom. You didn't move on to prove a point. You moved on because staying still would have cost you your peace. You didn't chase closure. You created it within. Like Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, and your thoughts are no longer consumed by someone who once left you uncertain." Share turns, but the version of you who needed her no longer exists. You're not waiting at the door. You're not lost in what-ifs. You've arrived at a place she can no longer access, not because you shut her out, but because she stayed behind when you chose to grow. That's the moment she realizes you're not hers anymore. Not because she lost you, but because you found you. And now she's staring at a man who no longer looks back. If you felt this message, conclusion today, let it sit with you. Let it remind you that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is walk away without looking back. If you found value in this video, hit the like button. It helps spread this message. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or simply type, "I choose peace." And don't forget to watch the next video on screen. It might be the clarity you need next. See you in the next one. Stay grounded, stay powerful, stay stoic.